Hello, my dear ones. So this is part 2 of my Pagan Easter spoiler. Please listen first to part 1 so you have the context. And it is in general a good idea to watch my former videos on other pagan fake Christian feasts. I deliver more and more evidence about how false most of this is. We celebrate as so-called Christians, but also as the Jews. They do many things wrong too. And also the Muslims. And all has been distorted and twisted so that we cannot serve the highest God, the God of Abraham, anymore. It's all mostly wrong. And this is so important. I can't tell you how important this is. It's utterly important to celebrate God's feasts, those he himself ordered to hold in the Torah, in the book of Moses. It is so important that you have really to come out of those crooked churches and religious institutions, especially from the Roman one, from which all other churches, also the free and Protestant ones, were derived. You can easily see that in the fact that they all hold those bad feasts. Those fake feasts the devil has created so that you never experience the power of God's good feasts. This is the sign of the Antichrist, by the way. You can read this in the Bible. He changes times and feasts. So which times and feasts? God's true times and feasts. And this counts for Christians, first and foremost, for Jews also, and extremely for the Muslims. The devil has done this also with Easter and crucifixion and resurrection. You do not know how much time and work and effort this has cost me over the years to work out these true feasts, because also the Jews and the rabbis have many of them twisted and wrong. The true ones you only, as I found out, you find in the Torah. From whom is interested in it, from second book of Moses, chapter 12 on. And then it goes further with chapter 20 on, and then again in Leviticus, the third book of Moses, and the fifth book of Moses. Repeat them again. So, pages over pages, God let Moses write over his feasts. So this is not unimportant. They are liars, betrayers who tell you this. And those feasts of God we have to take seriously, not the ones of the Antichrist churches who, with those fake false Christians and pseudo followers of those believers and those rabbis who lifted themselves above God's true word and orders. Following Yeshua, please do not call him Jesus. There was never a Jesus. There was never a Jesus Christ. This was not his true name. This already makes it fake alone. Yeshua also, means you, following Yeshua means also you have to hold what he held. This is part of his following. Because God's feasts, this is his father, right? God's feasts are also Yeshua's feast. Don't be mistaken. Say goodbye to Easter, to Christmas, to Pentecost, Pfingsten, all fake. To Ramadan, etc. It took me years and years of being confused, actually. The Torah means, God himself, prescribes days and feasts Christians do not even know. For a very long time, those bad and crooked churches and priests and pastors and preachers told me that this all doesn't matter, that only our heart and belief in Jesus counts for God, and that those times and feasts are not so important. This is shit, those lies. Well, today, after I found out, by myself, by the way, totally by myself, how all of this works, and this against all odds, against those lies. You know what God did in his feasts and in the Torah? God gave us a system of spiritual power. And those devilish churches, pastors, leaders, also the rabbis and imams and all those religious institutions and so on have abolished many of those. They have spoiled them. The Christian have twisted almost all of those. And by this, they abolished God. Don't be mistaken. Because, God, the highest God, the God of Abraham, the absolute highest Father, El Shaddai, has knitted himself into those feasts. And he has planned entire world history along and around his feasts. So if you don't know them, you are totally misled by your false preachers, no matter of which religion you come from. So do never again believe those devilish church leaders or religious leaders and their wrong feasts and times. Come out of there and serve God. Start to serve God by taking him seriously in his feasts. And if you're alone doing this, so is it. In all the churches I was ever in, they looked at me arrogantly, If you go against their feasts, you see the devil in their eyes, in their arrogance. And they treated me, I was stupid or too lawish or actually crazy, yeah. They all tell you that the Torah is not valid anymore. This is wrong. This is a huge lie. Do not believe those liars and devils who tell you this. They say this because of the lies of Paul, a blasphemer. They put Paul above God. Paul is the big test in the Bible. Do you follow God or do you follow the gospel of Paul? He calls it his own gospel. Ring. Your bells have to ring here. This is all blasphemy. Yeshua said himself that the Torah persists and is valid until the end of the world, and that his followers have to hold the law out of love from the heart. Love to the Father, to the neighbor, to oneself. It is certainly not unimportant. His feasts and his rules are not unimportant. If it were unimportant, God would never have ordered it in the first place. He would never even have spoken about it. Pages over pages, God lets Moses write about his feasts, describing them, giving the times and the process of it. So now listen carefully. I tell you now the true feast and how it should run. It is not called Easter, but it is the feast of Pessach and unleavened bread and of first fruit. You certainly never heard that, probably not even the Jews. The rabbis basically skipped first fruits because that would remind too much the Messiah. They changed the name of this feast and the day too. Stick to Torah. The fake churches and councils, mostly in the first centuries, the Christian councils, done with pagan emperors who were treated like gods, and fake bishops and so on, and also the Muslims in the first centuries under their Muhammad, who has twisted their stuff from Abraham away. They all skipped those feasts until today and all the rest of it, and changed the time and the days God ordered. They gave those days on top different names and changed their entire meaning. The Christians did that in the Council of Nicaea, 325. They changed the time and called it Easter. They changed Pessach into Easter, and they did not take God's time. They decided that it has to be 1 week after spring and the first Sunday after this 1 week. So totally twisted. And this is wrong. Do you know how this is called? This is called devilish, because only the bad one would have an interest to keep us away from God's great feasts, his true feasts. Do you know what I discovered? That a feast is not unimportant. A feast is not unimportant. How would you define a godly feast, huh? What would be your definition of a feast God prescribes? Ours. I give you my definitions. After many years of work and trying out the true feasts, a feast ordered by God is a nod of power, a real power station. Therefore, the devil does not want to have Jews, Christians, and Muslims to celebrate the same feast, the same day God ordered them all together in the entire world. The moment they and us all would do that, most feasts, by the way, begin with the dawn of the day before, not with midnight like in our twisted counting. If we all would do the right feast at the right time, you know what happens? There would be they would wander around the world as a total wave of power in every region with its own dance start. It would be like a wave of light and power going up. And I am so convinced that in this moment we all would do the right feast to the right time. The curtain between the visible and invisible world would disappear, because now it then would be on heaven like on earth like in heaven, because in heaven they celebrate the same feasts. So this is part 2. You see how sour I am, and I continue being sour, because those pseudo-Christians and pseudo-religious people and devils who changed all of this, and they keep it up and keep us away from our God's true power. I'm sour about the Jews who changed some of the feasts, and I'm sour about the Muslims because they changed almost all of the Torah too. And I'm so sour on my own religion. I came out from the Christianity. It was never a Christian. Jesus was never a Christian. Skip all this fake stuff. By the way, these are the laws and feasts Abraham himself held. So come with me on the right side. And let's begin with spoiling Easter. And in the last part 3, I tell you how Easter should really be, by what we should replace this crooked feast. Only today, until part 3, the huge spoiler, part 3, I describe how Easter should be replaced and what we should really do and when. And this is a bit complicated, so buckle up. I wish you a great Resurrection Day, a great day of first fruits. Goodbye, my dear ones.